the ones who made the decision, the fatal decisions, to let that kid reside with her evil killer father and his even worse stepmother. So
should be brought to task, judges or not judges.
And we're going to finish off by finding out why the Queen, the late Queen, and Prince Philip's private papers may not be released to the public, because they should be, but they may not be. We'll find out.
That is the legend that is Chagos Islands, a self-confessed Fulham fan who's depressed because the mighty Hammers beat Fulham 3-2 last night. We stand by for him. Keep the calls coming to the main man, 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. Have yourselves a fantastic night. We'll see you Monday from 4 for more drive time. News at 7 is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
There you are. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk all the way to 10 o'clock. I am your host, Kevin O'Sullivan. Now, stand by for 3 full throttle hours of news, views and topical debate. Get involved, get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000. Or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number, and as long as it's clean, I guarantee I'll play your message out. Another busy day. Here's what's coming up. Here's to the Sun newspaper and other press outlets that are appealing against the sinister secrecy surrounding the tragic case of little Sara Sharif, the 10-year-old schoolgirl tortured to death by her evil father and stepmother. 3 family court judges who made decisions that led to granting Pakistani immigrant Irfan Sharif and his monstrous partner Bainash Batul custody of Sara were all granted anonymity. Mr. Justice Williams declared that naming the bungling beaks would risk a social media lynch mob. So what? And warned that some of the media will not report the story fairly and accurately. Does that sound like a judge looking after his mates to you? Shouldn't justice not only be done, but be seen to be done? Shouldn't we know the identities of the learned judges who clearly made egregious mistakes with fatal results? Where's the transparency here? 0344 499 1000. In other news, all-round fury and bafflement as Labour's gormless government elects to scrap elements of the Legacy Act, which could add up to massive compensation payments to the 400 or so suspected former IRA terrorists who were detained without trial back in the midst of the Northern Ireland Troubles back in the 1970s, including former Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams. Why on earth does Keir want to open these floodgates? Why? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, the unfunny comedy of errors that is the migrant crisis continues apace after another 260 undocumented foreigners crossed the channel illegally on Monday. It emerges that a Home Office scheme to fit asylum seekers with electronic tags resulted in two-thirds of them going missing. And, of course, the number of people smugglers caught since two-tier Keir launched his hardline £150 million smash the gangs strategy remains, count them, zero. What a sick joke. 0344 499 1000. Plus, still with stupid Starmer's strange obsessions, it looks like the UK has agreed to wait for Donald Trump's approval before signing away the vitally strategic Chagos Islands to China's friends Mauritius in a dismal agreement that will cost us an annual £800 million for 99 years. Will Donald give this daft deal the go-ahead? I think it's doubtful. Don't bet the farm on it. 0344 499 1000. Plus, petulant Prince Harry's latest snub to the kind king ahead of his return to Britain next week. The scandal of Prince Andrew's Chinese spy pal's 6 UK company directorships, despite him being banned from the country. And finally, the continuing reign of silence as the fawning authorities keep secret the files and papers of the royals, purely to spare their blushes. Fears are growing that the late Queen and Prince Philip's private documents will not be released to the public in the standard issue 5 years after their deaths in 2026 and 27. Why? I don't know. Is this the class system at work in all its lack of glory? Politicians, other public figures, all their documents are released after their deaths and in the due course of time. Public figures. Why do we protect the Queen? Why do we protect Prince Philip? Why do we protect members of the royal family? Is it be me ever so humble, you know, your worship, we wouldn't do this to you? I mean, if so, that's all wrong. It should be the same for everyone. Class system, is that still at work here? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. All that and so much more. So don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Wednesday night together. And for the first hour, I'm really pleased to welcome to the show Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Welcome, Isabel.
Hi, where are we beginning this evening with a long litany of woes?
Just very, very briefly, because I've got other guests lined up for this. I don't want to be depressing or pessimistic about this, but I can't get too excited about this Gaza peace deal. It's not a peace deal for a kickoff. It's another ceasefire. The Israeli parliament's got to vote on it tomorrow, so we don't know that decision yet. So it isn't a peace deal. It's another ceasefire, and there's this agreement on the table to release 33 hostages at the rate of 3 a week, which seems a bit strange. Donald Trump, quite rightly in my view, is saying if you don't release all the hostages, there's no deal. So the television companies, ITV and BBC, are acting like, this is the Weimar Treaty or something, but it just the Versailles Treaty or something like that. But it isn't that much, is it? I don't know quite what we make of this.
Well, we haven't got anywhere near full details of it yet, and the headlines were incredibly sensational as the news broke. Peace in our time kind of thing. All over, bringing to an end the conflict. I mean, I wish that was so, and it's very exciting that there should be any significant progress. But as you say, what is this 3 a week thing? What is this, some kind of theatrical? We don't need hostages to be released in that manner. It doesn't inspire any confidence, does it? And sadly, many of the hostages that were taken are no longer with us. The suggestion is that this deal involves bringing hostages, handing them over alive or dead. Well, whoopee-doo. How awful for the families, and wondering whether their loved ones are going to be in the first batch of 3 or the last batch of 3 that we may never get to. I don't want to be too negative, like you, any progress has got to be welcome. It seems we're a long way off from, peace in the region.
I'd like to see, Donald Trump would like to see, I think Israelis would like to see all of the hostages released, and until such time as that happens, I don't see there's any peace. I mean, what about the families of the hostages who are still held, still held in captivity? So again, just as you just said, quite rightly, Isabel, let's not be too pessimistic about this, but this is not, the be-all and end-all deal to end this conflict. But we await developments tomorrow with excitement. I have more guests on that later on in the show. What I'd like to kick off with you, though, Isabel, I think this is a big story, that this is what I call the sinister secrecy surrounding the 3 family court judges who made decisions that led to that semi-human monster, Sara Sharif, and his equally monstrous partner getting custody of poor little Sara Sharif, and then, of course, torturing and killing her systematically. The judges who made those bad decisions, those mistakes, are protected by a granting of anonymity by Mr. Justice Williams, who said that to reveal their names, first of all, he said bizarrely, that would be like, if we're going to blame them, that would be like blaming the lookout, the watchman for the Titanic going down. Now, I wouldn't hold him solely responsible, but he's probably got a few questions to answer. So that was a bizarre analogy, if you ask me. But he went on to say naming them would risk a social media lynch mob, at which point I kind of think, so what? And then he said that some media outlets, he didn't speculate, he said, will not report this fairly and accurately. Will not. This is horrific. Justice must not only be seen to be done, it must be seen to be done. He is preventing transparency that we require. The justice system, I've never heard before judges being granted anonymity. They must be named. This is a question of a free democracy with freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and they must be named. And Justice Williams, in my mind, should be severely rebuked for what he said. How does he know? Those papers, you know what they'll do. Who the hell does he think he is?
Well, what he knows is that papers will pretty much go for it because these judges between them made errors of judgment, quite literally errors of judgment, because we all know what ended up happening, and it was utterly, utterly appalling. And so I think that they should be bold enough to stand up to either defend the judgments they made with the information they had available at the time, or hold their hands up and say, well, actually, we got this wrong, demonstrably so, because that poor little girl died. I agree with you about hiding away in the shadows. And I think the media would be brutal, but I think they ought to be lofty enough to cope with that. And that the law doesn't need to protect them in the way that it's clearly doing in this case. I agree with you about that analogy on the Titanic. Funnily enough, by coincidence, I've literally just rewatched the Titanic movie last weekend, having not seen it since it first came out, whenever it was, sort of in the 90s. And the Watchmen actually do hold some responsibility, certainly in the movie, they're slightly chit-chatting and, faffing around and having a cup of tea as the iceberg hoves into view. Yeah. So that was a useless and rubbish analogy.
It really was. I mean, he's sort of suggesting, I mean, why would you even think of the Watchman when the Titanic hit the iceberg? Oh, gee, Justice Williams, I don't know. Take a wild guess. Unbelievable. Now, in the this case, one of the reasons that Mr. Justice Williams apparently has reached the conclusion that we must not name these three judges, one of whom, by the way, the third judge, this is the main one, in 2019, despite many allegations of abuse by Irfan Sharif, Sarah's father, gave custody to Irfan Sharif. One of the reasons he did this was because in a written submission, Irfan Sharif's lawyers, Irfan Sharif is this semi-human monster who systematically tortured his little daughter to death. This was what was given to Mr. Justice Williams. Mr. Sharif is concerned that no harm should come to the judge who presided in the historic proceedings. I mean, well, let me tell you, I don't really give a damn what concerns Mr. Sharif, and nor, I suggest, should Mr. Justice Williams.
Couldn't agree with you more. Mr. Sharif, I'm not even sure why we're calling him Mr. The guy is an absolute animal. There is no word for an individual like that. I think there are wider questions here too about the operations of the family courts, and we all know they are very secretive, the family courts. All sorts of stuff goes on there which we never hear about, and largely rightly so, and that's because it involves children, and children certainly don't need to be dragged into the public eye when their parents are arguing or when there are cases of abuse and so on. But because of that veil of secrecy, I strongly believe that things that should be in the public domain and have sweeping implications are things that we just don't get to hear about. And probably terrible injustices are done or happen as a result of that lack of scrutiny.
Absolutely. As I say, this is Britain. This is the British justice system. It is a bedrock of our system that justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. Transparency in these matters is at the heart of our democracy, at the heart of our free country. And these judges, particularly the one in 2019, who took on board all the allegations of abuse against Irfan Sharif and said, no, I'm going to hand this poor kid to Irfan and his horrible partner, Bainash Batul. That judge in 2019, yes, he's going to get a hard time. Could be a she, I don't know. They're going to get a hard time, but they deserve it. And so do the other two judges. That's the way it goes. If you don't like that, don't be a judge. Simple as that. This is ridiculous.
Well, in almost any other walk of life, if you hold a very senior taxpayer-funded role and you massively screw up, or you make a judgment that has terrible consequences, you wouldn't expect to be able to hide away from that. You would expect the media to come after you, and rightly so. That's why our country isn't even worse than it currently is.
Yeah, so many judges do seem to despise the freedom of the press. That was what came across to me in this case. This is a judge going, oh, those awful journalists, they're going to give me and my mates on the judiciary a hard time. Yeah, well, suck it up as far as I'm concerned. This is about justice for that kid. This is about justice for poor little Sara, who was let down by the system, tragically. And if we don't know who made the mistakes, we're likely to make them again, aren't we? So let's name those judges. Good luck to The Sun and all the other media outlets who are currently appealing this appalling decision by Mr. Justice Williams. I think and I hope they succeed. When we come back, Isabel, we're going to talk about the migrant crisis and the latest almost comic balls up on the migrant crisis front. That next, stay tuned.
You know, the Chagos Islands that we're apparently giving away along with 9 billion quid to Mauritius, despite the fact that it's a very important place and there's a strategic place there for our military and the Americans. Trump raging. He's been saying for months, hasn't he, with his stupid sidekick David Lammy, we're going to give away the Chagos Islands. Let's make friends of Mauritius. Let's give them 9 billion whilst screwing the pensioners. Today, old Mr. Turn It Round has decided I'm going to ditch attempts to get it done before Trump arrives, because Trump could get quite angry with me and then there might be tariffs.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'll read you the first paragraph of a statement from Keir Starmer. It drones on and on and on pointlessly, but here's what he kicked off with. After months of devastating bloodshed and countless lives lost, this is the long overdue news that the Israeli and Palestinian people have desperately been waiting for. They have borne the brunt of this conflict triggered by the brutal terrorists of Hamas, who committed the deadliest massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust on October the 7th, 2023. Actually, that's not too bad. Well done, Keir, but not that he has anything to do with this. By the way, hilariously, remember Hamza Yusuf, the former SNP First Minister of Scotland? He has called... he's called David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, a racist. He's accused him of racism. And it was shameful for the Foreign Secretary to meet the Israeli government to discuss the ceasefire. That David Lammy was racist because he met the Israelis to try to help getting a ceasefire in Gaza. Hamza Yusuf. I give you former call centre worker Hamza Yusuf, a man who until recently was the First Minister of Scotland. What a disgraceful thing to say, Isabel.
Well, isn't David Lammy, though, getting a taste of his own medicine? Because he's exactly the kind of person who would say such a pathetically low-level thing himself. You know, this is the level of it amongst these left-wing politicians. Whenever anyone does anything they don't like or makes them feel a bit uncomfortable, the only adjective they can come up with is racist. I mean, this is why we are where we are. You know, if that is the only thing you can do as a reflex, start bleating about racism, then you end up with things like the grooming gang scandal and many other horrors besides. And
how asinine can you get? I mean, to call Lammy, I'm no fan of Lammy, but, you know, he spoke to the Israelis in a bid to help end the horror that's going on in Gaza, the deaths, the children dying, and Hamza Yusuf says he's a racist for talking to Israel. Well, lucky Scotland that they don't have that moron in charge anymore. Let's move on, though. Another day, really, another hapless mess on the migrant front. You'll like this one. You know, this is on Monday, by the way. 260 more migrants came across, so still they come. And it emerges today that the Home Office recently launched a pilot scheme to keep a track of all these asylum seekers that continue to pour into the country at the rate of, hundreds and thousands a week. Basically, so they're all fitted with these ankle tags, and this resulted in 2/3 of them going missing. And Albanians, they made a video. They called these ankle tags, they named them, they dubbed them British Rolexes. And these Albanian migrants made a video for the benefit of all the asylum seekers, showing them how to get the tags off. 2/3 of them then went missing. I mean, this ongoing catastrophe, this disaster is almost comical, but if you didn't laugh, you'd cry. And meanwhile, of course, the smash the gangs strategy remains quite literally 100% ineffective. So it is the best part of 6 months, of course, since they came into power. Yvette Calamity Cooper and Calamity Keir, they've splashed out £150 million on state-of-the-art high-tech equipment to help their border security command smash the gangs. The number of gangs smashed so far at that great expense, it's 0. It's none. I mean, it just beggars belief, doesn't it?
I'm going to make a little confession here, which is I love that story about the British Rolexes. I mean, it's tragicomic, isn't it? In no other country with any self-respect would this possibly be allowed to happen. You know, if you put an ankle tag on someone and they break it off, then that should be the end of days for that person. Whatever the consequences we can dream of that are truly appalling to contemplate, they would have to be the consequences for breaking off your ankle tag. There is no point in one that's just like a little rubbishy bracelet that you just have to, you know, snip off with a pair of kitchen scissors.
That's pretty much what it was, yeah.
What a complete joke. But wasn't there another type of ankle tag that only monitors whether the asylum seeker or whoever else it may be that's wearing it is at home.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Without a great deal of imagination required, the wearers of these ridiculous devices are cutting them off and nonetheless leaving the technology intact, and it just sits there in their house while they go walkabouts.
Yeah, and here's another thing, Isabel, the other comical aspect of this. The other way that the migrants and asylum seekers were getting around this was, wait for this, not charging their tags up. So they're required. You say, well, now we're going to put this tag on you, and you make sure you plug it in every night. So what they did, many of them, was not plug it in. So the next day it didn't work.
Yeah, I guess they would just say, oh, you know, I've lost the charger. I've got, one of Ed Miliband's electricity blackouts. You know, basically, I've not got the system to do this. You know, bad luck. Honestly, sometimes words, I know I'm paid to actually talk.
Well, I know words are failing me too. They really are. Let's just leave this issue with one question. You know, you and I and other people on this station and other media outlets, day in, day out, we say, look, it's clear that this Labour government, its strategy when it comes to the migrant crisis is an ongoing disaster. It was no mean feat to take the catastrophe of the way the Tories handled the migrant crisis and make it worse. Not many people could have done that, so you've got to hand it to Keir and Yvette for that. But seriously, when are they going to be brought to account? Because this is now the best part of 6 months. Nobody caught, no gang smashed, and they're coming across in their hundreds and their thousands to cost this country. Bear in mind, every migrant, so 260 came, I haven't done the sums, but 260 came across on Monday. Every single one of them, as they are welcomed into the warm embrace of this country and given 4-star hotels and 45 quid a week and free food and free lawyers, free doctors, they cost us, you, me, every taxpayer, £40,000 a year. Every single one of them. Think about that, 260 alone on Monday. So the question really is, when are they going to be brought to account about this ongoing epic failure to deal with this escalating crisis?
Well, £40,000 is more than most people earn in a year. So that's everybody, those people, it's their entire earnings, the equivalent of going to accommodate one of these channel migrants. And once you've taken the tax, that's a lot of people are about to pay their tax bills as it comes up at the end of the month. That really puts it in perspective, doesn't it? The amount you've got to transfer to HMRC, if you're self-employed, you're running a little business, whatever, it's probably going to be quite a bit less than it costs to maintain one channel migrant. And actually, just going back to the story about the ankle tags and the pilot scheme that was being run there was a kind of acknowledgement as part of that scheme that most of the people that were being tagged were economic migrants anyway. They weren't genuine asylum seekers.
Of course they're not, yeah.
Yet still we've got this high-level systemic denial that perhaps the majority of those that come over in boats, I would go so far as to say definitely the majority.
Vast majority. I mean, it was some statistics that I've seen in the past are things like 84% of all the migrants who arrive on our shore are young men between the age of 18 and 34.
Yeah, and they're pretty enterprising. These are people who've literally crossed continents and are prepared to take a few risks. And if we could actually harness some of those skills, that free-spirited, buccaneering attitude to life, then to something useful, perhaps they could be genuine, positive contributors to our society. But unfortunately, all we do is put them up in hotels, support them for months on end, literally years.
Years on end, yeah.
It takes so long. And then they sort of melt away and, perhaps in due course, some of them will make a net contribution, but the statistics actually show otherwise.
Yes, and here's a bit of broadcasting verite. While we've been speaking, I've done the maths. Even with a calculator, I'm likely to be wrong, but 260 came across on Monday. So that's quite a low amount, actually. We have single days sometimes where 1,200 come across. So quite a low amount. One day, 260 on Monday. That will cost us £40,000 each a year. That will cost us this year, that boat full, or 5 boats full it was, those arrivals on Monday will cost us £10,400,000 over the next 12 months. That's just so that everybody can get a grasp of the scale of what this is costing us.
It's really, really awful when you think of what a fraction of that sum could do to improve, for example, a crumbling NHS ward, or what that sum of money could do to improve the situation in a school which has got completely overflowing classrooms and could do with more teachers. And in fact, all it does is exacerbate both of those problems, adding more people to the queue for NHS treatment and more people who will ultimately need to be educated when they have children and so on. On and on it goes. It is absolutely appalling. And if the government can't smash their gangs, as we know of course they can't do, what they've got to do is start smashing the incentives to come over. This isn't difficult. Just stop handing out free stuff and advertising that you're handing out free stuff. And guess what? They'll stop coming.
Yeah, and so if you have one of those days where 1,000 come across, that's 40 million for the next year. And, deterrence is what we need. We need to say to them, you turned up here without any documents, you came across on an illegal boat, therefore you arrived here against our laws, you're under arrest, you're detained, you're not coming in, like Australia does. But we don't seem to have the will to do that. And let me tell you, Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper will pay the price of that, because Reform UK in particular are cashing in on this egregious failure by Labour to even scratch the surface of one of the catastrophes of modern Britain. So Reform UK will benefit from this, and Starmer, who doesn't seem to understand it, is going to possibly lose everything. I hope so. When we come back, talking to Starmer, we'll talk about his judgment. He's lost now his third major kind of operative in his operation. That is Tulip Sadiq. the anti-corruption minister, who's basically had to resign over allegations of corruption, which pretty much sums this government up, doesn't it? That next, stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about Keir Starmer. Let's talk about his judgment. One of his closest friends in politics, the diminutive former now Treasury Minister and also anti-corruption minister Tulip Sadiq. She had to quit yesterday. I think the expression is she was resigned. She wasn't formally sacked, but you can tell she was told to go. So she quit. She's gone. This, of course, follows him losing his... This is just in 6 chaotic months, losing his useless Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, and his convicted fraudster Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh. Now, Isabel, you know, in 6 months, that's a lot of key players for him to lose. And these are just not any old appointments. These are very key appointments. And we have to seriously question his judgment, don't we, in this respect?
Well, I question his judgment pretty much every hour of every day in every respect. And it's one of the most surprising things I think about someone who has actually made it as far as the role of Prime Minister. You know, you normally have to have very good political judgment to get to that position. After all, it's not as if there isn't much competition to get to the top. But in this case, it kind of seems like Keir Starmer trading off his sort of reputation, and we can talk about in another time how deserved that was for being, you know, a director of public prosecutions, which sounds like a very serious and authoritative and grave and highfalutin job, which it is. He didn't do it very well, but it seems like he got where he did politically just about off the back of that. You know, he hasn't actually been an MP forever. It's quite a relatively short MP career in which he didn't really have to do anything. You know, he fell into line behind Corbyn, kept very quiet because secretly he didn't agree with what Corbyn's agenda was, although I have to say it's not really deviated that much from it.
No, exactly.
But he kept quiet all those years, remember? So that's a good chunk of his time as an MP. And then he just sort of rose almost organically by keeping really quiet while the Tories screwed everything up at the end of 13 years. So we didn't actually get to see much of the real Keir Starmer before he was pretty much foisted upon us by an exhausted, exasperated and hopeful electorate who naively believed that things couldn't get any worse. And how wrong they were.
Exactly. Now, Rupert Lowe, the redoubtable Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, who is a very successful businessman, so successful that he's got enough money to give all of his parliamentary salary to local charities and causes. Good for him. Now, he's a businessman, and he said that he stares across the chamber at the front bench of Labour. He said he's seen it in business when directors, when bosses realise about themselves that they're not able to do this job, they're not up to it, and he says he sees fear in their eyes. Very interesting observation, I thought.
I think that's right. And, you know, it's something that I think Mel Stride yesterday from the Tory front bench observed, you know, looking over as he engaged in urgent questions on the dreadful state of the economy with the Chancellor, observed that none of the Labour lot have got any business experience. And that is a really worrying thing. No wonder we're in the sorry state we're in economically if none of them have ever had to run a business. But you might think even just running the household finances would teach them that the way they're going is only going to result in disaster. And it's really important, you know, if you're going to be at the top of politics, that you've actually had some real life experience. And unfortunately, Labour benches are stuffed full of ex-councillors and general, you know,
spads, former spads, aren't they? They're, you know, they used to be bag carriers for ministers. Now they're junior MPs, and they will rise up the ranks. Now the really bad thing about all of Keir Starmer's mistakes in who he appoints to these top jobs is that he's going to be very reticent about getting rid of Rachel from accounts, because the Chancellor is obviously the most key appointment a Prime Minister makes, second most important person in the country, and to have to jettison your Chancellor of the Exchequer is a disastrous moment for any Prime Minister. So he probably will not do it. But you know, no matter how bad she is at her job. Now, this is what we're witnessing now. It's like an unfolding shambles. So you got Rachel Reeves the other day saying, oh, it's because she's got, they both got these kind of voices, haven't they? So she's similar. Yeah, she's saying, there will only be one fiscal event in the year, one budget per year. There is no need for any more. Keir Starmer today in Parliament, will there be an emergency budget? Did he deny that? No, he didn't. Will there be a budget in March? Did he deny that? No, he didn't. In other words, she's saying no more budgets. Him, he's not saying there won't be any more budgets. I mean, you know, you get one story from one of them, another from another, and no clarity. And Keir Starmer knows he's got a real dud on his hands in the case of Rachel Reeves. And I think he also knows what the rest of us knows, that despite her denials, there will have to be some sort of emergency budget before too long.
Well, a Prime Minister and a Chancellor need to work in lockstep. And over all the time that I've been a political journalist, it's been unusual to reshuffle a Chancellor. I mean, there was a few cases towards the end of the recent Tory years. We had Nadeem Zahawi, who didn't last very long because of some historic tax issue, I think, and there was a rather more speedy rotation, shall we say, because Boris Johnson was so much on the back foot and fighting for survival, and then obviously ousted. But when you look back at governments that have been strong and stable, dreadful phrase.
Oh my God.
The number 10 and the number 11 have worked effectively together, as they actually did for a long time during the Blair-Brown years. Even those two were secretly at loggerheads a lot of the time. It was a very functional relationship. In fairness to Cameron and Osborne, they worked incredibly well together. I don't remember really any fallouts between.
You're right. You're right.
So Starmer's not going to want to get rid of. Absolutely no way is he going to want to get rid of her. But I think he's going to have to, certainly within the next year and a half, if not sooner.
And you said that, more cabinet ministers should have real life experience. So let's be fair. Rachel Reeves did work in the call centre at the Halifax Bank. So, she knows what she's talking about. She was also, of course, an economist at the Bank of England. I met a guy who worked with her the other day. I'm not going to say what his assessment of her talents was, but he was not a fan, put it that way. Anyway, let's go to break now, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about another of these awful cabinet ministers, Bridget Phillipson, who I think, against stiff opposition, particularly from crazy Ed Miliband, is arguably the most dangerous person in the cabinet. She's a little class warrior, she really is. We'll talk about Bridget next.
corruption scandal, not of her making, but in the family. Her aunt was the leader of Bangladesh.
And there was definitely some connection to Tulip.
Even if it was the house she lived in.
There was that, I think she was involved in some way in a deal done with Russia back in 2013, done with Vladimir Putin to build a nuclear reactor in Bangladesh.
Yep.
And she was pictured with her aunt and Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still talking to Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, we were just talking about Keir Starmer's judgment. I would question his judgment in appointing Bridget Phillipson to the very important job of Education Secretary. She, of course, has declared war on our traditional school curricula. She believes that our existing educational framework is outdated and diversity must be at the heart of future learning, and that the overhaul that she wants must reflect the diversities of our society. You know, in other words, they won't be teaching the 4 R's and sums and, you know, when the Second World War was and all that kind of stuff. Shakespeare, no doubt, will be seen as some old guy you don't want to know about. All of that. That's pretty dangerous in itself. But if you recall, when they first got into power in July, her first act, almost immediately, was to cancel a Tory act, which was almost passed and ready to roll. It was ready to roll, actually. She cancelled it, and what it was, all it was to enshrine freedom of speech on university campuses. In other words, unless you were going to go and preach hatred and war and violence, anybody should be allowed to go and speak their views on our university campuses without fear of cancellation. Students and lecturers should be able to state their opinions as long as they're, you know, fair and reasonable and not violent, without fear of cancellation. So what was wrong with that act? Everybody's going, yeah, about time, yeah, good idea. In other words, no platforming of visiting speakers just because the students don't like their opinions. No platforming of Jewish people because, you know what university students are. They tend to be a bit anti-Semitic, a lot of them. So no more of that. Now, Bridget came in and cancelled it. She just cancelled that, which, in my mind, made her a blatant enemy of freedom of speech. Like so many socialists, she doesn't like freedom of speech. She's now, thank God, been forced to partially reinstate some of the clauses in this act so that a certain amount of freedom of speech may still be allowed, and no staff will be subjected to cancel culture, allegedly. But this woman, this woman is just a class warrior, if you ask me.
Well, we knew that, and we've known that since she presided over the imposition of a 20% tax on private school fees on parents who are already paying vast amounts not to use the woefully inadequate, in many cases, state school system. I mean, most parents don't elect to send their children to private schools because they're crashing snobs who can't bear to be around less well-off families. They do so because they just want to give their children the best possible start in life. So she was public enemy number one from the start of that, as far as I'm concerned. As for the curriculum being outdated, I really agree with her on that. I mean, I think the curriculum needs to reflect much more of, you know, what it takes in life to be successful, public speaking skills, understanding about money, understanding about enterprise, understanding about geopolitics, all of that. What I don't think it needs is a whole load of wanging on about diversity and inclusion. It's the precise opposite of what it needs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Bridget, you're spot on that the curriculum is out of date. Our kids need to know how to add up, and they need to know when the wars were. They also need to know how to be successful in an age of global competition. And they're not going to get that way by learning about diversity and inclusion and all that ideological twaddle, because trust me, the Chinese and their competitors in the Middle East are not focused on any of that. They're busy figuring out how to send the next rocket to the next planet.
I think she's got all the makings of a kind of, one of these ministers who absolutely destroys what they're in charge of. So who was that minister back in the 60s who destroyed the railways, got rid of all the railways and is seen as one of the biggest disasters ever? I'll remember his name in a minute.
You're about to test my political history there. I'm definitely not old enough, and definitely whatever.
I'm going to look it up while we talk. But she has got the makings of an education It's the Beeching, Richard Beeching. Remember, he's the one who got rid of all the small railways that connected little towns in Cornwall and Scotland to the big cities. It was a lovely railway system. He decided that these small communities didn't really need these expensive trains, so they remain to this day completely cut off. Our railway system to this day, thanks to him in the 60s, remains ineffective.
But don't worry, we've got HS2 coming sometime in...
Oh, God, don't even talk about it. But she to me, has the makings of a minister who is going to wreck what it is she is in charge of, and that is our education system, right up to university level, where she's doing her best to ban free speech.
I think you're right, actually. I mean, she's already demonstrably wrecking the private school sectors. Several schools have literally closed, and many, many more will follow, make no mistake. And what happens then is pupils pour into the neighbouring already inadequate in many cases, state schools, and that just makes standards probably go down unless she's magicked up some other teachers. And I think that's going to get increasingly difficult because teachers are fed up of being paid not very well to work in wretched environments when they could actually go and teach abroad and get tax-free salaries and work in a kind of nice classrooms which aren't full of kids who are bringing stuff into school that requires them to have security scanners as they go in.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Bridget Phillipson is representative of a party that, due to some of its mad diktats, looks set to ban controversial conversations in pubs. You know, you won't be allowed to...
You and I will be in big trouble then, Kevin. That's basically us doing.
I think I can see the police waiting outside the studio now with handcuffs. They're going to arrest me. These lunatic lefties, they're the enemies of free speech. They're the enemies of freedom. And I really worry about Bridget Phillipson. She, to me, has the potential to vandalise already not particularly good education system. I think
the thing about her, why she's sort of particularly scary, is because she's sort of operating below the radar, isn't she? She is catatonically boring. I've just looked at her CV. And she is one of those people we were talking about before. She has, I think, literally never had a job outside politics except with a domestic violence charity that her own mother set up. Now, she's a bright cookie. She went to Oxford University.
Oh, yeah, I know that, yeah.
And she did come from, you know, deprived background.
Yeah, she's a Geordie, isn't she? She's a Geordie, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to demean that.
No, absolutely not.
Personality-wise, she hasn't really attracted any attention whatsoever because she's just really dreary and dull. And for that reason, she is quietly being able to get away with her furtive, sinister little operations to undermine free speech and parental choice and so on. Who knows what other horrors she may have up her sleeve.
These people, her, you know, I said that she could well be the most dangerous person in the cabinet, but I'm just saying that for effect. She's the second most dangerous. The most dangerous is, of course, crazy Ed Miliband. But both of them are indicative of these crazed left-wing ideologues who saturate our cabinet, you know, who don't seem to really care about efficiency, about things working. They just want to impose their left-wing ideas on all of us with disastrous results, and that's really worrying.
I just never thought it could be this bad. You know, I've never experienced in my adult lifetime this type of politics. I've only experienced it from people who are not actually in power. But to see it playing out like this, it's really shocking. You know, it really is sobering. And we are only less than a year into it. And you just wonder, how much further do things degenerate? You know, there is a massive set of economic shocks likely to be coming down the track.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it's all terribly worrying. We'll talk about some more of this tomorrow, Isabel. Thank you so much. Brilliant contribution, as usual, from Isabel Oakeshott. We'll talk about the Legacy Act in just a minute.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Before we're going to talk about the Northern Ireland and the Legacy Act in just a little while, because Gerry Adams, among many other suspected terrorists back in the 1970s who were detained in Northern Ireland without trial, could be in line for massive amounts of compensation, thanks to the fact the government wants to axe elements of this Legacy Act, which protects us taxpayers here in Britain from having to pay these people. So for some reason Starmer wants to get rid of that and start handing cash over. Gerry Adams, the former Sinn Féin president, is a likely beneficiary there. So we'll talk about that in just a second, but just before we do get to that, I wanted to say that old Joe Biden, who thinks his legacy will be bringing peace to the Middle East in this Gaza deal. It won't be. His legacy will be falling off bicycles and not managing to get up aeroplane stairs. That's what we'll remember this old geezer for. But he's trying to take credit for it, and somebody asked him at a press conference, is this down to Donald Trump? Is this the Trump effect? He said, is this a joke? Is this a joke? No, Joe, it's not a joke. It's true. And in his robust defence of himself, he characteristically mistook Hamas for Hezbollah. He started calling Hamas Hezbollah, so he's off again. And then the Qatari Prime Minister, in a press conference, was asked just that. Was this the Trump effect? Was this because when Donald Trump becomes president next Monday, he said that unless there's some kind of peace deal, unless the hostages are released, to quote him, he said, all hell will break loose. The Qatari Prime Minister said, yes, it's down to Donald. So, thanks, Joe, but no thanks. We'll return to that in just a little while. We'll play you Joe boasting about how brilliant he is. He likes to do that, God knows why. Now, let's talk, though, about a very serious story today. Back in the 1970s, I'm old enough to remember it, there was a place called Longkesh and other Northern Ireland prisons where hundreds of suspected IRA terrorists were interned. They were detained without trial. Kind of controversial. One of them was the then president of Sinn Féin, Gerry Adams. Now, the Legacy Act was brought in to protect the British government from having to pay these people, these 400 or so, who were detained without trial, compensation. Gerry Adams has always sought compensation. He still does. Now, if these amendments to the Legacy Act come into act, then we're going to have to pay them a lot of money, including Gerry Adams, although bizarrely today the Prime Minister said he'd do his level best to make sure Gerry didn't get any money. Well, if they pay the others, they'll have to pay Gerry. So to discuss this strange turn of events, I think, a warm welcome to from the Policy Exchange think tank, which today released a report revealing this development. He's head of Judicial Power there, the Judicial Power Project at the Policy Exchange, Richard Eakins. Welcome, Richard. And also to defence analyst Colonel Simon Diggins, who I know is spitting tacks about this. So welcome to both of you. If I can come to you first, Richard, why is it, do you think, that Keir Starmer and Labour want to, amend the Legacy Act and thereby landing British taxpayers with an inevitable, enormous bill compensating all these guys, or I guess it mostly was guys, from the IRA or suspected IRA members, for being detained without trial. Now, being detained without trial was controversial, but there were logical reasons for it. Why on earth, after all these years, nobody's shouting and screaming about it, why does Starmer want to do this?
Well, the way to explain it, I think, is to see it's not that anyone who was detained without trial is to be compensated. It's the argument is that Gerry Adams and at least 400 others, but maybe more, were not detained lawfully in the early 1970s. Now, I think that's clearly wrong, but it is what the Supreme Court held in 2020. They allowed Gerry Adams' appeal against being convicted for trying to escape from lawful custody. They allowed that appeal almost 50 years later. And that's what set in motion the events we now see before us. Now, in 2023, Parliament quite rightly amended the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy Bill, as it then was. They amended it to reverse the Supreme Court's judgment, not to reinstate Gerry Adams' conviction, but to stop him and anyone else in the same position bringing a claim for compensation.
Right.
Now, the whole bill, the whole act is controversial. Many provisions in it are controversial, but this bit was not. So the Labour opposition, as it was then, they supported it too. To see why we've ended up where we are today, last year, February last year, a Northern Irish a High Court judge in Northern Ireland declared this part of the Legacy Act, as you call it. He declared that incompatible with human rights, with the Human Rights Act, and because of that, the government have acted as though they have to change the law in response, but they don't have to change it. They chose not to appeal that judgment, that part of the judgment. And they're choosing now to bring forward amendments. They don't have to make that choice. They could stop it today if they wanted to. So
they're not obligated to make these changes, but for some reason they want to.
Well, so the Northern Irish High Court declared quite a lot, or several different provisions of the Act incompatible with human rights. And the Labour government campaigned in the general election to replace much of the Act. And I think it's possible at least, they've simply overlooked the fact that this part of the legislation is part that they supported back in the day, and there were very good reasons for. So I suspect they're acting on autopilot in one sense.
When this row, I'm going to go to Simon in just a second, but one last question to you, Richard. When this row erupted today, it looks to me as if Keir Starmer hadn't noted that this may entail having to pay compensation to Gerry Adams. And he just blurted out in the middle of the afternoon, oh, well, I'll do my level best to make sure Gerry Adams doesn't get any compensation. Well, if they start paying the others, they'll have to pay Gerry Adams. You can't just, pull one guy out of the pack, can you?
No, for sure. It is very odd. And clearly Gerry Adams is in the same position as the other 300 or 400 who are bringing claims, and there may be more. I found the Prime Minister's statement, which I saw obviously reported. It's encouraging in one sense that at least he's sort of acknowledging it's a problem. It's also slightly baffling, as though he's got to find some way of solving this problem. The solution is straightforward. Don't persist with the law change that you and your government are proposing. Simply don't go ahead with it, and then the 2023 legislation will stop the claims proceeding. That's a sensible thing to do. It's the thing we argued for in our policy exchange report, backed by 16 peers, and I hope the government in the end sees sense. And if they don't, the Parliament does and refuses to support it.
Well, there you have it, Simon. They don't have to do this, and yet it seems they want to do this. Now, you're a soldier, a former soldier. A lot of your brave comrades in arms, lost their lives in Northern Ireland. I can remember the 70s where barely a weekend went by without some kind of bombing atrocity where kids and mums were killed in shopping centres. Now, in these extreme circumstances, it was decided that men that were, known to be associated with the IRA had to be detained for the safety of the public. Now, I can see that that's controversial, but, don't take this wrong, but I would imagine you can remember those days as well. They were extraordinary circumstances. Those guys were detained without trial, but for a good reason. They don't deserve compensation, do they?
No, they don't. And if I can just commend Richard and also the Policy Exchange, for I thought was a very well put together report and a very clear exposition of the issues. So I'm really grateful for that. What strikes me is if the Policy Exchange had not done that report, this would just have gone through on the nod quietly through Parliament. So, real kudos to themselves for pointing this out. I think what's particularly interesting for me is how technical the whole issue was. One of the basis of the original appeal was the fact that the detention order against Jerry Adams and others had been signed off by a junior minister and not by the Secretary of State. I mean, it's down to that level of kind of real nitty-gritty bureaucratic objections, which is where we are. But we could find ourselves in a position where through, I think, I'd like to say incompetence and lack of political nous, but there are other explanations. We could find ourselves in a position where the government might be forced to pay out on the basis of a judge's interpretation in Northern Ireland, people like Jerry Adams for what was a reasonable, if not now technically completely lawful detention. I mean, there's no question about IRA. Adams is involved with the IRA. He's always been very circumspect about admitting it, but you can read lots of accounts now by former IRA men, and they're really absolutely clear about his involvement. He was detained perfectly reasonably, given his links to the IRA. And that seems to me to be the substance of this whole thing. We're trying to move on from 1997 and the Good Friday Agreement, and that requires an awful lot of compromise on both sides. People have actually got to accept they're not going to get what they wanted, and to some extent the bitterness, the hatred, the killing has got to be put to one side. This sort of claim is really negative and really unhelpful in terms of taking that forward. And I think that's the key to it, there's missing here. Where is the sensitivity? Where's the political nous? Not just from the government, but from other people about, if you decide to start stirring this particular pot again, where's it going to lead to? And it seems to me that's what's missing, that sense of, whatever happened, we drew a line in 1997 and we aimed to try and move on. Bringing this back in like this now is distinctly unhelpful, and I think that's the real sadness, indeed disappointment, with this news today.
And we're talking about Jerry Adams. In those days, the Sinn Féin party was referred to as the political arm of the IRA. So he had the connections. He denies any connection to terrorism or anything like that. But there's no doubt there was that connection there. Him and 400 or so other men were deemed too dangerous to be at liberty. What about, Simon, the feelings of, your colleagues, the brave soldiers who all lost their lives, and of course the relatives of and the loved ones of all those people, those many people who were blown up and killed during those dark days during the Troubles. I mean, what about the feelings of them? I mean, isn't Keir Starmer taking that on board?
No, I mean, I think that's the sadness. I mean, there's this kind of this very legalistic approach, and of course he is a lawyer. And there's also question marks starting to arise over the role of the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, who was Adams's counsel in some of his earlier compensation claims. So there was a question mark about some conflict of interest there, which I think needs to be properly addressed as well. But the bigger issue, to say, all those people lost their lives, and I think the sense from, I can only speak for myself, but whatever happened during those eras of the Troubles, and I served in Northern Ireland in 1984, 85, and 86. So, and we lost soldiers, and I was aware of other soldiers being killed, and all the other horrors that took place at the time. We all sort of felt that if all that sacrifice could put to one side, if a sustained peace could take place, and I think. What I find, as I said, one thing I find so distressing about this is not just the incompetence of the government and their sort of lack of understanding, but where's that sense of the bigger picture? Where's the sense of, we're trying still, the Troubles haven't finished, we've moved into a political dimension, but how do we get to a place now where we can accept, if you like, the ugly parts, because it is a really ugly past, and there are aspects of the British Army's behaviour in Northern Ireland which also need to be called out, and I do not defend some of the bad things we've done as well. But let's put that to one side, recognise it for what it was, a horrific civil war with a long history behind it, and move forward. Going back over this now is really, really unhelpful, and I think that sort of lack of sense of there's a big picture here that we're not getting from Starmer and his government is really disappointing to me.
Absolutely. Now, Richard, would you Starmer's sympathy for this, as Simon quite rightly says, he's a lawyer, he's a human rights lawyer. This, in the end, is a human rights issue. Do you think that is why He's sympathetic towards these possible changes in the Legacy Act because it's a human rights issue and that's his playing field.
Well, I think it's certainly true. He seems to be very uncomfortable with the idea of disagreeing with a judgment that's about the Human Rights Act. The true oddity, though, is that, I mean, Keir Starmer is an experienced human rights lawyer, so he should be capable of grasping the idea that if you get a bad judgment, you can exercise a right of appeal. So the government's decision not to appeal this any further is really quite bewildering. And I think a bit distressing, really. It's a very ill-considered decision for many of the reasons that Simon has given. And it will have, I think, if it is not stopped, very poor consequences for the future.
Is there still an opportunity for the government to stop this, though?
There certainly is. The proposed change they've made, I mean, we have drawn attention to it. The Joint Committee on Human Rights is considering it, and then the Houses of Parliament will have an opportunity to debate it as well. And the government can, at this stage, still amend the order so that they won't repeal the provisions of the 2023 Act that do stop these claims going ahead. At least 300 to 400 claims, including claim for compensation by Gerry Adams for wrongful conviction, so-called, but maybe more to come thereafter. So it's certainly possible for the government to stop this of its own volition right now, or for Parliament to resist. And the government, if Keir Starmer meant what he said at Prime Minister's questions, I think in this regard, then the course of action is obvious.
Yeah, well, his solution was, I know what I'll do. I'll make sure that just Gerry doesn't get any compensation.
We'll see how much.
That sounds fairly ridiculous. But look, thank you very much to Richard Eakins and Simon Diggins. Excellent analysis there. Richard Eakins is head of the Judicial Power Project at the Policy Exchange. And, of course, Colonel Simon Diggins, regular on this show, regular on this channel, is an expert defence analyst and former top soldier. So good stuff there. Let's hope that Keir Starmer sees sense and doesn't open these unnecessary floodgates. It's just not necessary. Talking of which, we're going to talk about the unnecessary handing of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. China's friend Mauritius. By the way, just before we go to break, do you know how far the Chagos Islands are from Mauritius? 1,400 miles, 1,400 miles, about the sort of same distance from London to Marrakesh or something. It's like us sort of saying, we definitely deserve to have sovereignty over, I don't know, Albania or something like that. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Why are we handing it to Mauritius? Mauritius has never had sovereignty over the strategically crucial Chagos Islands, but there are lots of new nuances that we need to discuss straight after this break, so don't go anywhere.
It's just very powerful to hear the reaction of those who suffered at the hands of the IRA and people they know who suffered at the hands to this outrage. And as I understand it, you know, what you explained earlier, Jeremy, that the government has now flip-flopped on this.
Of course they have.
Keir Starmer said, actually, after all, he won't be paying any money to Jerry Adams. No one will.
Only because not because he had the intelligence to understand the frustrations of people like Noel, but because he realises the public outcry again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about the Chagos Islands. Well, it's quite a convoluted story, but as you know, for some months now, among his many strange obsessions, Keir Starmer has been obsessed with handing the strategically crucial Chagos Islands down there in the South Pacific, which is 1,400 miles from Mauritius. But he wants to hand sovereignty to Mauritius, which, of course, is China's best friend, in a deal that would cost Britain an annual £800 million for 99 years. Well, let's go straight over to, because this involves the Americans in a big way. They've never been that keen on all of this, and I'm with them. Let's talk to a spokesperson for the Republican Overseas Organisation here in London, Errol Moorcoach. Hello, Errol.
Hey there, thank you for having me.
Are you in London? Because every time I seem to talk to you, you're always in California. Are you in Britain today?
No, actually, I mean, I was in a pretty awful car accident. So I'm not able to travel for like another month, but I will be there. I promise you, the next time we talk, I will be in London.
Yeah, well, that's how to shut me up, isn't it? Are you okay? Are you okay?
Well, yeah, I was in Lake Tahoe. I got hit on about 6 sides, 8-car pileup in the snow. So everybody's fine. Except me.
Well, I hope you get better soon, and thanks for coming on under the circumstances. But let's talk about this. Now, the story as of this morning was that our government, Starmer, and his Foreign Secretary David Lammy were desperate to get a deal done with Mauritius, to give them the Chagos Islands before Trump came in next week. Before he was inaugurated on Monday, isn't it? Now, that then gave way to a news story, which is really interesting, which is that Starmer has now agreed, we don't know the veracity of this, but it's in the Financial Times, so we're not talking about some kind of irresponsible tabloid here, that Starmer has now agreed to wait until Donald Trump is in office for Donald's approval. Now, we're talking mainly about, on this archipelago of the Chagos Islands, an island called Diego Garcia, which has this strategic airport used by American jets, British jets, and with that we keep an eye on the Middle East. It's very, and indeed, you know, China and everything. It's very, very important. For some reason, Britain has been desperate for some time to give these islands to Mauritius, even though Mauritius has never had sovereignty over them and is 1,400 miles away. Now, given what I've just said, Errol, I think Trump is going to take one look at this deal, which, by the way, as I say, will cost Britain. What we'll do is we give sovereignty to Mauritius, but we rent Diego Garcia. That will cost us £800 million a year for 99 years. I mean, you know, Mauritius never even asked for these islands. I don't know why we're doing this. But I would say that Donald Trump is going to take one look at this deal and say, Well, no. No, this is about American security. I don't want these islands owned or, ruled by China's best friend.
No, you're absolutely right. And it comes down to, I think it points to something else, too. Joe Biden was very much behind this occurring as well. So if Donald Trump had not won this election, whatever powers that be that are compelling these people to do these deconstructive acts, it's not about like some sort of vestige of colonialism. It's the fact that if you give away the islands around the base, then you are going to be spied on, just like you see in Cuba, as we have Guantanamo Bay, but it's surrounded by Cuba. So the whole thing is surrounded by spies. And we have long-range bombers with sensitive data coming in and out of there. We have warships. We have undersea vehicles that probably were using around that area. The last thing we need is a Chinese eyes literally right on it. At least make them work for it. At least make them put some effort into their espionage. And so that's what Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are going to do on day one, is look at this and say, this is ridiculous. It's not going to happen, because it can't happen, because it makes no sense economically, politically, militarily. It's as though somebody was trying to destroy the Western alliance who would come up with such a plan. Otherwise, nobody would have wanted it. And it looks like Joe Biden was 100% behind it. So the outgoing American administration is just as complicit in this nonsense as Keir Starmer currently is. But I think they realize, like, hey, things have done a 180, and if you're going to have any chance of working with the Americans, you're not going to be going around giving away their strategic military assets that you are custodying and have been doing a very good job of. There's no reason. There's nobody asked for any of this, as you said. Well, so I think it's going to common sense will rule the day.
Once again, thank God for Donald Trump, the Trump effect. Now, let's move on to events in the Middle East that have been raging for the last few hours. Joe Biden, who thinks his legacy is going to be the great man who brought peace to Gaza. It won't be, as I just said. His legacy will be falling off bicycles and not managing to get up aeroplane stairs. That will be his legacy. But in his press conference, he's confused Hezbollah with Hamas. So he's got the wrong group of terrorists. Let's watch this because he gets quite touchy when it is suggested that the reason there's been a peace deal, or the beginnings of a peace deal, is because of Donald Trump. Watch this.
The history books credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you. Thanks, sir.
So he's not happy about that. Biden is taking credit for the Gaza deal, but Arab officials say, I believe this was the Prime Minister of Qatar, which has been a peace broker, has confirmed this. They say, and I'm quoting, Trump's envoy swayed Netanyahu in one meeting. Meanwhile, as I say, Biden confused Hamas with Hezbollah. This is on the back of, is it not, Errol, the fact that Donald Trump just a couple of days ago said if there's not a peace deal in Gaza and the hostages are not released when I become president, I think his phrase was, all hell will break loose. It's the Trump effect, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it was actually a two-pronged effect. I mean, Donald Trump is somebody who you don't want to leave waiting. And he didn't ask for those hostages to be returned after he was elected. He didn't say, do like what happened with Ronald Reagan. When I'm elected, release the hostages. He said, this was a few months ago, release them now while I'm still campaigning. Now he's saying release them or all hell will break loose. Meanwhile, he goes over and he talks to Netanyahu and he says, look, man, like he's the most amenable guy to the Israeli state right now that you could have in the White House.
Great friend of Israel, absolutely, unlike Joe Biden, yeah.
Right. But he said, because of that, you also need to work with me. And in a deal, not everybody gets what they want. So, yes, they did have to make some concessions, release some prisoners. But in the end, that's the art of the deal. And he was able to convince the Israelis to sign the deal. And while domestically there's been some pushback there, Netanyahu realized, hey, it's better to work with Trump and work towards peace than to hold out this war that's been going on for far too long. So it shows leadership on both sides of the aisle. It shows how he can work with our allies and how he can basically speak softly and carry a big stick with our enemies. He's just a different iteration of Roosevelt, and it's going to be a very exciting period of time for American history.
You said Art of the Deal, though. That would be a good name for a book, wouldn't it?
Maybe.
Let's just quickly talk about the alleged special relationship between Britain and America. Now, what we here in the UK have got going for us is that Donald, despite everything, despite all the insults that have been levelled against him by our current government, most of the cabinet have called him terrible names. The Foreign Secretary called him a neo-Nazi. The new ambassador to Washington said he was a white supremacist, and so on and so forth. Despite all of that, what we've got going for us is Donald has a great affection for Britain. His mother was Scottish. He definitely likes this country. That said, Errol, I would say the special relationship is going to be difficult. Neither Two-Tier Keir nor his new Washington ambassador, Peter Mandelson, have been invited to Trump's inauguration on Monday. I think we can read something into that, although it's not automatic that British Prime Ministers are invited to presidential inaugurations. They have been on many occasions. So I think it's pointed that Keir's not going to be there. And I think it's very pointed that the new ambassador to Washington, Britain's new ambassador to Washington, the Prince of Darkness, Lord Peter Mandelson, also hasn't been invited. I think it's going to be difficult, the relationship between Donald Trump and our socialist government here.
Absolutely. Outside of Five Eyes activities and highly sensitive military or espionage things, it's going to be fractured. I mean, Lord Mandelson, I mean, stateside, nobody knows who that is, but I mean, he has said some things that aren't very favorable. I don't think Donald Trump wants to work with this guy. And Keir Starmer, beyond everything he said, also sent over all those people to work to campaign against Donald Trump. So at an inauguration, which is supposed to be a celebration of America, a celebration of a peaceful transfer of power, all of the things that we cherish as Americans, I think Donald Trump just said, I don't want these guys here, and you guys change your government enough that probably we won't see them in 6 months. And if we do, maybe we'll deal with them then. But I think he's just assuming that eventually they'll be removed from power because they're just not people who we can work with. They see the world in such a different way. And they've also been very rude to President Trump. And he doesn't really allow that. If you're rude to him, he takes it as a personal insult, and he doesn't necessarily need to forgive you. He'll give them second and third chances if they keep getting elected, but at least on the surface, he's going to play it cool for now.
Yeah, he's a pragmatist, but he does hold grudges, and let me tell you, Starmer is going to suffer because of that. And I think the first thing he'll do is he will nix this Chagos nonsense, and for that, I think the whole world should be grateful, particularly Britain. 800 million quid a year for 99 years to give this strategic island to a country that doesn't particularly want them and has never had sovereignty over them. I mean, the insanity of that is off the scale. Errol, well, listen, get well soon. When you come back to London, I'll buy you a drink. When you finally get back to London, good to talk to you as always. Thank you very much. Errol Moore, coach there, spokesperson for the Republican Overseas Organisation. Next up, Harry's coming back to Britain next week, and it's a familiar story. He's dished an astonishing snub to the King. Find out all about that after these messages.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about Prince Harry. Apparently he's coming back to Britain next week on one of his increasingly numerous return visits. And he is going to get limited, I'm quoting here, limited police protection. That was always part of his deal, although he's banned from having full armed police protection when he comes back here because he's not a frontline royal. If he applies in advance for some kind of protection, it was always available to him. So he's getting limited police protection. But the kind king, as always, has offered his son a place to stay at Buckingham Palace. But Harry, in what is becoming something of a tradition, has turned that offer down. That will force costs up for the Met Police, who will have to watch him at some hotel or something like that. So, meanwhile, his bid to sue the Home Office to demand full armed protection, police protection for him and his family when they return to Britain, continues apace. It's already cost him about £1 million. He's been told by a judge it will never succeed, and yet, like a dog with a bone, he won't let go. Let's talk to the author, former cabinet minister, of course, but also the author and What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know, Norman Baker. Norma, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Kevin.
What do you make of this? So he's coming back. He has, in terms of the agreement he has, applied in advance for limited police protection. They won't be armed, so he's going to get that. He's refused his dad's offer of a place to stay at Buckingham Palace. And by the way, the police would love him to stay at Buckingham Palace because, of course, it's pretty secure. They don't really want him in some hotel. But it looks as if he will stay in a hotel. Why is it that this petulant man just continues with this court case, demanding armed police protection, which he doesn't warrant because he's not a frontline royal, no longer a frontline royal? Why does he persist with this, do you think?
Well, he persists because you said he's a dog with a bone and he won't let go. But let's be quite clear about this. So far, he has lost in the courts his case for police protection. And therefore, there's no reason, in my view, why the Met should protect him at all, unless there is an immediate and serious threat against him personally, which I doubt very much, in which case you'd have a duty to do that. But in the absence of that, he shouldn't get any protection at all. And the fact that he's not staying in Buckingham Palace, the police should say to him, look, mate, you've been offered somewhere secure. If you don't say they're secure and you want to go somewhere else, not our problem, because you've turned down a secure venue which is available to you. But listen, here's a fact, Kevin, which I think Prince Harry, who said he's worried about security in his country, ought to be aware of. In the year to the end of March 2023, there were 29 gun deaths in this country, in England and Wales, 29 gun deaths. In America, in 2023, there were 46,728 gun deaths. So, Harry, tell me, which is the more vulnerable place for you to be, the US or the UK?
And also, Norman, you will recall that last year, strangely, Harry and his wife, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, went on these kind of pretend royal tours. Yes. Very odd spectacles they were too. One was to Nigeria, and the other was to Colombia, two of the most dangerous countries on the face of the earth. So you get mixed messages from this guy about his safety and his family's safety, don't you?
It's either a status symbol thing or it's just being petulant and he wants to get his own way. Either way, we shouldn't be having any truck with it. He's not a working royal. He's absented himself from the royal family. He's entitled to do that. If he wants to do that, that's fine. If he wants to go and live in California, that's his entitlement. No one should be shackled to the royal family forever. They don't want to be shackled. But once you opt out of the royal family and you opt out of being a working royal, then you opt out of all the bits and pieces that go with it, including royal protection.
I think this is what that's about. His whole stance on his royal protection is. It's about his status. He sees his brother. He sees his uncle, Edward. He sees, of course, the king. He sees the rest of his family here. Everywhere they go, coppers with guns. The full Monty. That's the status he craves. And as you quite rightly say, we don't mind paying our taxes to look after our working royals. Why should we pay taxes to look after a guy who, for this nation, does the square root of sod all?
Well, indeed. I mean, do we pay police protection for Elton John, for David Beckham? You know, I mean, why we don't, and why should we? Unless it's an immediate and imminent threat against an individual, they should not receive protection unless they are in a particular vulnerable position, which is a working royal of seniority. And by the way, we do have police protection for junior royals who probably shouldn't have it, or for senior cabinet ministers like the Home Secretary or the Prime Minister. This is not a kind of add-on. It's not a luxury you add on just to make you look good. It's something that needs to be there only when there's a threat towards you.
Let me ask you just a last question, not connected with this, but I've done a couple of stories about this. Now, you know, the Los Angeles fires, a real tragedy. I used to live in Los Angeles. It's a personal tragedy for me to see a city that I love literally destroyed by this inferno. Great swathes of a fantastic city razed to the ground. Now, Harry and Meghan turned up in the middle of this, you know, to theatrically hug a couple of victims, to be photographed sifting through the wreckage of someone's house, you know, with the embers still burning, their possessions still, you know, smouldering there. And a lot of residents of Los Angeles just said it was a disgusting spectacle. An actress called Justine Bateman, who's a very famous actress over there, TV actress, she said these people are disaster tourists. Other people have called them tragedy vultures and grief grifters. And it looks suspiciously to me, just my view, but I know that it's shared. I have many friends in LA, and this is what everybody thought. I thought it was just for a photo op. No other major celebrities went and did that. What were your thoughts on that, Norman?
Well, I mean, look, I think we used to call them ambulance chasers in the old days. Look, I mean, were they there to do anything useful? Or were they there to get a photo op? And I think we know the answer to that. And, you know, getting a photo op out of someone else's tragedy is not an attractive proposition. It
certainly isn't. I don't know the veracity of these reports, but I did read one report that said they spent the whole of 17 minutes sifting through the wreckage. So that was the level of their commitment to that tragedy. Norman, how great to have you on board. Come on again very soon. That's Norman Baker, former Cabinet Minister, of course, and author. He's a royal expert because he's written a book, his great book, called And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. It's a really good book. Have a read of that. Next up, we are going to talk about another royal story, really, but it's not. It's about Prince Andrew's Chinese spy mate, who's been banned from the country for his espionage activities. This was the guy that Andrew got to meet Prime Ministers Theresa May and David Cameron. Got right up and close and personal to the higher echelons of Britain's political meritocracy, and you know, just really got his tentacles into British society thanks to Prince Andrew. Well, he's been banned from the country, and his appeal failed because he's a spy, basically. All the papers keep saying he's an alleged spy. Well, courts of this land have decided he was a spy. He was spying for the Chinese Communist Party. Well, quite right, he's banned from the country. Thanks very much, by the way, for your characteristically excellent judgment, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, the not-so-grand Duke of York. But he's still got 6 directorships to British companies. And apparently there's nothing we can do about this. Well, so the security risk continues apace. We'll talk about that next. Stay where you are.
as government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We found out about that dim oaf Prince Andrew's propensity, his tendency for forging friendships with ill-advised people when it emerged that he was a close buddy of well-known paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. But also he had a friendship with a guy called Yang Tengbo. He was a Chinese businessman, or he is a Chinese businessman, but he was also a Chinese spy. I'm sure Andrew didn't know that. Through his friendship with Andrew, through business connections, he ran Andrew's pitch at the Palace operation over in China. He managed to get to meet Prime Ministers David Cameron and Theresa May, and managed to mingle in the highest echelons of Britain's political class. So his tentacles ran deep. Now, he was banned from the country a couple of years ago. He appealed against this, and the appeal failed. The Home Office banned him from the UK after MI5 deemed him an espionage agent in, and I quote, covert and deceptive activity on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. OK, so he's banned. He can't come back. Good. Silly Prince Andrew, of course. So that one's over and done. We're safe. Well, we're not. It turns out that Yang Tengbo has not been removed from Britain's corporate register and remains a director of 6 British companies. Am I missing something, or is this not a good thing? Let's talk to international security expert, friend of the show, friend of the channel, Will Geddes. Welcome, Will.
Good evening, Kev. Thanks for inviting me on.
This makes me think that this country doesn't take security seriously.
Well, we do, but one of the problems that we have is some of our legislation, Kev, and really what this comes down to is the UK Companies Act of 2006, which allows very many legitimate foreign directors to be directors of UK companies. But having said that, it is something which is a very, very typical tradecraft for foreign state actors to embed themselves into the community of the country that they want to undertake surveillance on, or try and influence or gather intelligence in some shape or form.
Let's talk about Yang Tengbo. As they said, he's a spy, and people were saying the name is Tengbo. Yang Tengbo. It doesn't quite have the same ring as James Bond, does it? But you'll recognise this in an amateur fashion. I kind of admire his skill. He managed to wangle his way into the highest political levels using useful idiot Prince Andrew. I mean, he operated in a classic way of a man involved in a kind of espionage, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. And you touched on probably one of the most valuable points, which is about, utilizing and exploiting and recruiting useful idiots, and especially those that are in the higher echelons of society or in commerce or in trade in some shape or form. Now, one thing that we do know about the Chinese intelligence agencies, MSS in particular, is that their skills are in stealing foreign intellectual property. So some of that unique data or designs or proprietary trading data, which they can then duplicate or they can exploit by various different means to create economic espionage. And this works on many areas. And Tengbo is a perfect example of a very long, slow burn, long fuse espionage operation, where it's taken a little while. You go in at the right level. He probably met a number of people before he actually connected with Prince Andrew, but it's garnishing the respect, the credibility, the affability, if you like, with those individuals, and it's cultivating them to then be introduced to other people. And as you say, it was this palace initiative of trying to drive business into China, which was a perfect opportunity for them to exploit.
Now, the Business and Trade Committee chairman in Parliament, Labour MP Liam Byrne, he's written to Companies House to ask why 50-year-old Tengbo's directorships are still active. And he's got a reply saying, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Well, don't we need to look at these laws and maybe repeal them so that people like Tengbo, you know, a spy, can't remain a director of 6 British companies? It seems to me sort of pretty elemental and ridiculous.
Well, there are two sides to that coin, Kev. There's the side which you're absolutely right. We don't want foreign agents being able to establish or be participant in businesses in the UK and have that legitimate cover, if you like. But there's the second side of it, and I would say, no doubt this is being addressed with Companies House and perhaps at a legislative level, if you like. Once the security services, once MI5 have rinsed all the intelligence they can about what these businesses were, who were connected to these businesses, where's the money coming from, where's money being generated, because that can be quite fruitful in establishing other agents who might be connected in this country, who may be sleeper agents that may not necessarily be directly involved in the company, but may be beneficiaries of dividends. They may be perhaps engaged as suppliers, or they could be clients. There could be all sorts of things. So, you know, there are some benefits to allowing it to play out for a little bit, but once it's played out, there should be a capacity to be able to just strike them off as one would with any other individual that shouldn't be running a company in this country.
How much of a threat is China to Britain in this respect? How many other Yang Tengbos are operating as we speak, do you think?
Enormous amounts, Kev. A lot more than you might imagine. You know, it's embedding into the UK when we know, whereas with other state actors, they will want to be participant in much more sort of volatile, visceral, tactical operations. The one thing we know about China is they are very much about the economic espionage. It's about understanding what makes our business and commerce and industry tick, becoming engaged in some shape or form as investors, or even embedding themselves as employees within these companies. So, and there's a lot of it going on, Kev, and they've been doing it for a long period of time. They've been playing this very long game for a considerable amount of time.
And obviously playing it with some panache and skill. Do we do the same to them, Will? Do we have people, you know, British Yang Tengbos over in Beijing operating in a similar fashion, you know, inveigling themselves into the higher echelons of Chinese society?
Well, it would be naive to say that we wouldn't, Kev. However, it does depend on the culture, and it depends on the country itself and how friendly they are to foreign nationals or to Brits, for example. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the Far East. I spent a lot of time in China, in Hong Kong. You know, we'll still be referred to as the Guilo or the foreign devil in many regards, and perhaps won't be.
Or was that just you?
It could have been just me, Kev.
But yeah, I mean, have we got a handle on China's activities, or is it spiralling out of control? We spoke at the beginning of this conversation. I said, do we take security seriously? You said we did. But if we have all these Chinese spies operating like Tangbo, are we taking it seriously enough?
Well, we're taking it as seriously as we possibly can. But I think where the big failure here is with Prince Andrew's courtiers or his secretaries that are around him. And the introductions that are made to Prince Andrew should be more thoroughly vetted, I would have hoped, and that they would have been tested out. And certainly engagement with the security services, they may choose to be engaged or they may choose not to and just remain in the shadows and observe either at close distance or from afar. But really, to go to your point you just made, Kev, it's a bigger problem than we perhaps have truly established. I think we speculate that it's a big problem, and I think it's again realistic to speculate it's a big problem. But it's ensuring that they can't get into certain key infrastructures in business, in government, and otherwise, to prevent them being able to influence those areas. And remember, influencing can come from extortion, blackmail, all sorts of other areas.
Yeah. Will, fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on. Talk again soon. Will Geddes, the international security expert. Next up, we'll be talking about the private papers of the Queen and Prince Philip. Stay tuned for that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Taking your calls in 20 minutes or so, 03444991000. After that, we'll go all the way to 10 o'clock, so the floor is yours after 9:20. Give me a call. It's good to talk on Talk, so much to discuss. Now, let's talk about Britain. In the DNA of Britain is a kind of urge to secrecy. We like keeping secrets in this country. But with a view to that, we have a tradition where government papers, documents, after 20 years are released to the public in the interests of governmental transparency. Also, you tend to have members of the royal family in particular, but other prominent people, public figures. Their private documents and papers are often released after 5 years after their deaths. So it was expected that the late Queen and Prince Philip's papers would be released to the public in 5 years after the death, which would be 2026 and 2027. But there are increasing fears that we won't get to see much of these documents because talks are already underway in Whitehall about what should be kept under wraps. Now, my next guest knows all about this. He's an author, name's Andrew Lowney. He wrote a brilliant book about Lord and Lady Mountbatten. Lord Mountbatten, of course, the cousin of the Queen, the late Queen, who was killed in an IRA bombing attack. He had a long history, working with the government. He supervised the partition of India, many say with disastrous results. He wasn't, in the end, famed for his competence. But in those days, if you were royal, you got the big jobs. You got the important gigs. Anyway, Andrew fought a long 4-year battle, basically with the government, to get to see the personal diaries of Lord and Lady Mountbatten, which were under wraps, kept in under lock and key at Southampton University. Now, Southampton University didn't release them to Andrew on the advice of the Cabinet Office. The government went on to fight a £600,000 legal battle with Andrew. And the former Foreign Secretary, Lord Owen, and I have a lot of sympathy for this, called this legal battle a grotesque abuse of public money. Well, welcome to the show, Royal Commentator, historian, author Andrew Lowney. Thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Not at all. Pleasure. I mean, in fact, we did get the material released.
I know you did. I was about to say that.
Yeah. So eventually we got 33,000 pages released. But it cost me close to £500,000 personally fighting this case. So I think the government, who had top QCs, would have paid a lot more than that. We actually have a case now where I'm trying to get access to the correspondence between Edwina and her lover, Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of India. And that was bought at the same time with public monies to be seen by the public and still remains closed. So that battle hasn't been entirely won, I'm afraid.
So, I mean, at the root of this, it strikes me, is a certain fawning attitude, shall we say, the remnants of the class structure where we deliver to the rich, famous and indeed royals kind of privileges that the rest of us don't get, that somehow there's still an urge in Britain to protect, our society betters, the royals. And personally, I don't like that much.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea is it protects the dignity of the monarchy, but the dignity of the monarchy is protected by them actually behaving properly. I've just finished a book on Prince Andrew, and Prince Andrew was able to get away with all the things he did because he knew there would be no scrutiny. You're absolutely right. We do need changes. I mean, this is our history which is being played with. And in fact, the rules seem to be very unclear. I mean, even Andrew as a public servant, as the special representative for trade, we can't look at his material until 2065. There's material going back to the reign of Queen Victoria, which is closed. I've just done a book on the Duke of Windsor. Much of that material is still closed, going back over 100 years. The protection files from the 1920s relating to the Duke of Windsor, which are closed. And yet here we have members of the royal family writing books, appearing on television shows, briefing tame journalists and writers. The thing is ridiculous. I personally
they're still protecting the Duke of Windsor.
Absolutely.
That's ridiculous, isn't it?
And further back, I mean, even further back than that. I mean, all royal wills are sealed, so we have no idea actually how they pass on their wealth. There's no register of royal interests, so we have no idea of the business activities of people like Prince Andrew. They operate through front men and often will disguise their names at Company's House. I had lunch today with someone who, in fact, was instructing them to actually be much more open about their financial investments and not hide them in offshore trusts. So, I mean, there is a lot that could be done. I think there needs to be an investigation into royal finances. We've had hints of it with Channel 4 and with the Sunday Times investigation, but there's an awful lot that still needs to be made clear. We pay for them, and they only really exist because of our support. And if they're going to earn that trust and respect, they have to be rather more open about how they operate.
And as I say, or as you said, you were largely successful in your battle over Lord Mountbatten's private papers. But why did the government, the Cabinet Office, waste, or I would suggest waste, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of taxpayers' money to protect the reputation of a man who's long dead? Is it because if you really go into his stewardship of the partition of India, it sort of proves him to be rather incompetent, didn't it? Is it all about we cannot have royals seen as being incompetent?
Well, I think it's partly the deference that you talked about. I think partly it's trying to make an example of people like me who have the nerve to actually challenge this. What we discovered with these 33,000 pages of documents, which were only their private diaries, was it was all completely innocent. So
After all that,
it's about parking your tanks on the lawn to prevent, in some ways, more important things coming out. But I've got terrible problems at the moment getting access to anything relating to Prince Andrew's time as a trade envoy. There were literally thousands of documents produced by the diplomats. The Foreign Office don't have it, the Department of Trade don't have it. My understanding is this material may have been passed to Buckingham Palace and it's just filling up a corridor there. And I know, talking to sensitivity reviewers who review these documents, they're told basically any reference to the royal family, redact it and close it.
What is it that presumably the royals back this wall of secrecy that surrounds them and all their activities, but what is it they're frightened of? What is it that, in your view, that they don't want us to know?
Well, they have lots of secrets that they want to keep hidden. With Prince Andrew, it's clearly his activities, his financial activities. That's the real scandal for him, not the sexual activities. My book will be coming out shortly, and I will reveal another Chinese spy who's close to the Yorks.
He's got another one.
There's another one, absolutely.
Oh, my God.
And there may be others. But, the Duke of Windsor was a traitor to this country. That they covered up. They tried to suppress the information about that after the war, and they've continued to try and suppress it. Mountbatten was a paedophile who preyed on young boys. There's another case going through the High Court in Belfast at the moment. Another boy has come forward. And this is the stuff that they don't want out because, of course, it shakes at the monarchy. But my argument is that we've got lots of members of the royal family doing a good job, and they're undermined by these rogue royals who behave in a way knowing that they're not going to be caught because of this deference and this protection. The Freedom of Information Act doesn't even cover the royal family. They can do what they want.
And in your attempts to write a book about Prince Andrew, have you got a title, by the way?
Entitled.
Very good title. Entitled. Now, do you, when you do a book like this, did you actually approach him and say, right, how about you sit down and give me a big interview about all your activities? That way we can make it all fair and square and above board. Do you ask him that?
Yes, I'm always trying to be as balanced and fair and accurate as I can, and I want to give people an opportunity to not necessarily just talk themselves, but put people in touch who know them well and present a more balanced picture. He's actually, and it's a joint biography with him and his ex-wife, they didn't want to cooperate and they actually told people not to talk to me, which is, you kind of wonder why. So as a result, the narrative isn't shaped by them, it's shaped by the people I talk to, and it doesn't present a particularly attractive view.
Would it be possible, I would imagine the circumstances are different, but would it be, you're talking about papers and documents concerning Prince Andrew that you're not able to get access to, would it be possible for you to launch a similar legal action that you did to get the Mountbatten documents out of Southampton University? Could you attack someone legally to say you have to give me these documents?
I think it's quite hard. One of the problems under that 20-year rule is the material has not been deposited in the archives for lots and lots of people. Something like 80 or 90% of government files are destroyed with no record kept. So the rules aren't really being followed anyway for everyone else. The situation with Mountbatten was a decision by the information regulator, and the Cabinet Office in Southampton appealed against that. So we'd gone through a process. I think this can only come through sort of pressure from the courts, pressures from the media, and indeed parliamentary inquiries looking at the activities of the royal family, particularly their business activities.
Absolutely. And when he was Air Miles Andy, old Prince Andrew, flying around as an alleged trade deal, apparently a trade envoy, his first question wherever he went was, where's the nearest golf course? So his activities as a trade envoy were suspicious, to say the least. But when does Entitled, great name, when does that come out?
It comes out in a few months' time.
Well, when it does, will you come back on and we'll talk about it?
I'd be delighted to. Thank you.
Andrew, always good to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Fascinating stuff. Royal commentator, historian and author there, Andrew Lowney, fought a long battle with the government to get papers and documents about Lord Mountbatten and his wife, Lady Mountbatten. When he finally got them, the government, having spent like hundreds of thousands of pounds, £600,000 legal battle, they were innocent. What's that about? Kind of weird. Anyway, next up, well, for the rest of the show, we're going to take your calls. I'm going to read out some of your messages. We've got plenty of time. So give me a call. You know what we're talking about tonight? I mean, you might want to talk about the Gaza peace deal, which, as I say, it's got to be ratified yet. It doesn't come into play until Sunday. And not all the hostages will be released, but Joe Biden trying to take credit for it. But the Prime Minister of Qatar, who brokered the deal, said, well, it's the Trump effect. Donald said, if we don't do a deal, all hell will break loose next week. So already the Donald is having his effect. What do you think about the fact that our legal system, British justice, has granted extraordinarily anonymity to the 3 judges who made decisions that led to poor little Sara Sharif having to live with her evil father and stepmother, and they beat her up and tortured her to death. Bad mistakes were made. A judge says that those judges can't be named because the press can't be trusted and they write inaccurate stories. There'd be a social media lynch mob. Well, you know, frankly, so what? You know, they're judges. We have to name judges. Your thoughts on that? This is about justice for Sarah. 0344 499 1000. Also, Jerry Adams and the 400 suspected IRA members, IRA associates who were interned, who were detained in Northern Ireland jails in the 1970s without trial, thanks to Keir Starmer approving this, could now be in line for astronomical amounts of compensation. As we heard earlier, we don't need to do this. Why does Keir Starmer want to do this? I would suggest because he's a human rights lawyer. It's all about human rights. Well, never mind their human rights. What about the human rights of all the victims of the IRA bombings? You know, all the soldiers, all the mothers, all the children, all the fathers who died during the 1970s and the 80s, all those bombs. What about them? How about their human rights? Give me a call about that. Also, what about Prince Harry? Prince Harry and the Chagos. Prince Harry coming back here. He's told his dad he doesn't want to stay at Buckingham Palace. Well, you know, he's going to stay in a hotel or something and we're going to have to protect him, apparently. What do you reckon on that? 0344 499 1000. But you can call me about anything, by the way, anything you like. But one last suggestion. The Chagos Islands. Keir Starmer, David Lammy, these idiots are still obsessed with the idea of handing those strategic islands in the South Pacific to Mauritius, 1,400 miles away. Mauritius never had sovereignty over them, never particularly wanted them. We've decided something to do with colonialism or something. We've got to give it to them, give it to them. They, well, we don't want it that much. Oh, well, we'll give you £800 million a year for 99 years. How about that? Oh, yeah, all right then, might do that. Anyway, Donald Trump has got to make a decision on that. We've decided to wait until he is president next week. And let me tell you, I'm certain he's going to turn around and say, over my dead body. So, Donald, the Trump effect again will save this nation, from the most ridiculous deal I've ever heard. So give us a call about that, 0344 499 1000, as I say, or anything else you like. Give me a call. Let's talk. It's good to talk on Talk. Stay where you are. We'll be back in a mo.
A lot of us grew up watching Prince William, navigate life without his mother. And I think that was one of the reasons we were so heavily invested and worried. And we didn't want him to have to be worried about his children not having their mother. So this is incredible news. I thought that the family handled it with such grace over the last year. It's not just the fact that she's young, it's the fact that she's got 3 adorable children that you can tell are absolutely in love with her.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Now, I'll read a few messages, then we'll go to the phones. This is from Martin Spencer. Am I alone in recognising that Starmer is a gift to the nation? That is a gift to the nation from Russia, with love. Martin in Oxfordshire there. Now, this one, I'm not sure what to make of this. This is from someone called Yippee Kaye. Yippee Kaye. And Yippee Kaye says, great show, Kev. Love watching you. You are like the Basil Fawlty of Talk TV. Absolute legend. Never change. Well, if I like Basil Fawlty, maybe I ought to think about changing. But thank you, I think. This is from Simon in Shifnal. Anyone know where Shifnal is? Anybody know? Look it up, can you? Someone? Let me know where Shifnal is. Anyway, this is a great show. Thank you very much, Simon. The Labour government tried to suppress media reporting of illegal migrant crimes in order to prevent civil unrest, but they are happy to support the repeal of the Legacy Act, which could also trigger civil unrest once again in Northern Ireland. Another prime example of the two-tier and hypocritical actions of this atrocious government. Keep doing what you're doing. We will, Simon, and that's a pretty good text, I got to say. Here is one from Ian in Somerset. Another good point, this. With respect to compensation, Starmer must consider the priorities. And the IRA are not top of anyone's list. Post office and dodgy blood compensation are far more important. And the human rights of the British girls to the rape gangs are important too. Love the show. That's from Ian in Somerset. I think it's a good point. It's a good point. And I'm just going to read this last one. I like this. It's from Sandra. Bear with me. I can remember, says Sandra, I can remember meeting an ex-soldier while we were on holiday. His son was a similar age to ours. He couldn't do much with his boy because he was in a wheelchair. He had been caught up in the IRA bombing in Hyde Park. Why are the victims always sidelined in this country and the perpetrators treated with kid gloves? Adams has blood on his hands. He should get nothing. That's regards Sandra from Essex. It's a really good message. It was Hyde Park, Sandra. She wasn't sure. And I remember it. That was a terrible, terrible bombing. Happened one morning, weekday morning. And not only were a lot of soldiers, they were taking their horses for a little ride around Hyde Park. And all the horses were terribly injured and killed as well. It was terrible, terrible, terrible. Jerry Adams, I should for the record say, denies any involvement in any of those atrocities. He says he doesn't have blood on his hands, but he was president of the Sinn Féin party then, and they were known as the political wing of the IRA, and he was deemed a threat to safety and put behind bars without trial. He was in Longkesh, I seem to remember. So make of that what you will. Let's go to the phones, and first let's talk to Matt in Cheshire. Hi, Matt.
Hi, good evening, Kev. I just wanted to talk about Joe Biden, if that's okay.
If you must. No, seriously.
Not long to go before we don't have to, but Isn't it just convenient and coincidental that 4 years before the end of the most dangerous and incompetent reign in probably presidential history, that it now appears that he's brokered a deal?
It's kind of. I mean, you know, he is desperate to say that this is his legacy. He will claim this is his legacy. As I said earlier in the show, I think as far as most people are concerned, his legacy will be falling off bicycles and not managing to get up aeroplane steps. So that will be his legacy, and also constantly making verbal gaffes. Even in his speech, oh, yeah, I've done it, I'm remarkable, I've tried a peace deal, I've done it, Gaza, it's all down to me. He mistook Hezbollah for Hamas. So he started talking about Hezbollah, which don't have much to do with Gaza. So he's still at it. But I think, you know, the Prime Minister of Qatar has brokered this deal, which comes into effect on Sunday. He said that it's all down to Trump, that Trump had said, when I get in on next Monday, if there isn't a deal, if there isn't a peace deal, this is actually called a ceasefire, but I assume it leads to a peace deal. He said all hell will break loose. The Prime Minister of Qatar said this is down to Donald, and I think it is.
I agree, Kat. I mean, in my mind, I think Biden has probably paid Hamas to just stop temporarily until he leaves office. To, like you say, to make it look like there's like a grain of something to cling on to that you can call a legacy.
Yeah.
And it also conveniently takes the news cycle away from the Los Angeles fires as well.
Yeah, exactly. And the Democrats have got a lot of questions to answer in California and Los Angeles. The Democrat mayor, the Democrat governor stand accused of basically defunding the state and the LAFD, the Los Angeles Fire Department. And a lot of critics are saying the thing about these Dems, these dozy Dems, is they don't even do the basics. You know, they're too busy being woke to worry about whether or not there's any water in the fire hydrants. That kind of nuance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's DEI before saving lives, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know, Matt, that one of the there are three. You know, I'm just saying this in passing. It's a fact. The three women, nothing wrong with that, who run the fire department are all lesbians. They're also, strangely, all called Christina. Anyway, one of them is in charge of equality. You won't be surprised to hear. And she gets $399,000 a year. Do you know what she said? She said the most important thing in the LAFD is diversity. And I responded, but I don't think it is, actually. I mean, call me controversial, but I would suggest that the most important thing for a fire department is putting out fires, wouldn't you think?
I would say in that state, I would say water is the most important thing, because it's well known to have a shortage of water anyway, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I used to live there. There are reservoirs there right now that are completely drained of all water. The one good thing that will emerge from this catastrophe in poor Los Angeles, that poor city, it's a great city, and it's so sad what's happened to it. The one good thing is that gormless governor, Gavin Hair Gel Newsom, can kiss goodbye to his dreams of ever being president of the United States. He's blown it. He doesn't deserve to do it. He's incompetent. He's useless. He's ridiculously woke. They call him the U-Haul governor because everybody hires U-Haul trucks to put all their possessions in and leave California. Yeah, so if there's one good thing to come out of this, at least we don't have to put up with President Gavin Newsom. Matt, very good call. I'm with you all the way. Matt in Cheshire. We've got time. Let's go to Steve in Leeds. Steve, you want to talk about migrants. What would you like to say?
Yeah, good evening, Kev. Great show as always.
Thank you.
Just a quick one. If it costs us $40,000 a year for each migrant, I got my calculator out and I worked out we've got 140,000 migrants in the country at the moment.
Yeah, go on.
Under peace, it'll cost us $2.8 billion. You clear the country in a month, and then everybody that lands each year, the 30,000, pay them 20 grand. Cost us $600 million. You'd save £5 billion a year, and then you can give the pensioners the money back, take the VAT off the school fees.
Yeah, you think about it. I think the last time I saw, there were, estimates vary, but about 160,000 asylum seekers in this country waiting for their applications to be processed. 160,000, multiply that by 40,000 and the asylum seeker crisis, the migrant crisis, is costing this country, I think it's 10-11 billion quid a year. It's just absurd. Now, if it's going to cost that much, Steve, the government should be doing something about it. Instead, they just suck up these costs and allow them to increase month by year.
Well, bear in mind, Kev, these people are economic migrants, so they're coming for money, yeah? And they're coming from countries like Sudan and Eritrea. If you said to them, I'll give you 20 grand, they'll go home a millionaire in their country. Yeah. And you're giving foreign aid to that country as well, so you can knock it off the foreign aid budget. Yeah. Because guess what? We've just given your people the foreign aid direct, rather than paying it to some bent government minister in those countries who just pockets the cash. Yeah,
somebody gave me a ring the other day. It really is daft, the insanity of what goes on with these migrants. There is a scheme by which asylum seekers, get this, you and I, if we go to A&E, we might wait, if we're lucky, 5 hours, probably 10, maybe 15. There's a special scheme whereby asylum seekers can be seen in 15 minutes. They get priority over British citizens. So somebody said, well, look, if you have an accident or something and you need to go to A&E, I mean, I suppose this only really applies to people who live in the Dover area. The way to get a quicker way to get seen than just waiting in your local A&E at your local hospital would be to get on a ferry, sail to Calais, get on a small boat and come back as an illegal migrant, and then you could get into your A&E department, and it would be quicker than just waiting. See, that's how it works. Yeah. That's the insanity.
Just quickly, Kev, bear in mind, we already pay the people we send back to Albania 7 grand to go back already.
You see, half the problem with this, Steve, is when we give these people money to leave the country, a lot of them come back anyway. But what we need to do is stop the migrants coming in the first place. Deterrence. Come here, we'll arrest you. We'll detain you. You broke our laws. You're going home. We can't keep. We don't have any deterrence. We only have enticements. We're basically saying right now, get yourself on an illegal small boat, sail illegally across the English Channel, land on Dover Beach illegally, or Deal Beach, or Folkestone, or wherever, and then we will give you a 4-star hotel, £45 a week, free food, free doctors, free dentists, free lawyers to fight your case to stay. I don't see any deterrence there. Do you, Steve? I only see enticements. That's ridiculous, don't you think?
If another country like Eritrea said that, I'd go there on a boat. If I knew I could get a free hotel, heating, and all that lot in their country, I'd leave Britain.
I'll tell you, it's absurd. Steve, really good call. Call me again. Steve in Leeds there. Let's go to break now, and after these messages, we'll come back to the phones. I'll read a few more of your texts, so stay tuned.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Right, let's get a few more messages in here. Now, this one is from David. Now, David says, Isabel, this is Isabel Oakeshott on my show, of course, earlier for the first hour back there from 7 until 8. It says, Isabel suggested employing the boat people. No, no, no. Just stop the damn boats. Once the free stuff is stopped, and as much force as is required in the channel to stop them coming, then we can start gripping the internal stuff, rape gangs, etc. Now, David, I respect the general train of what you sent me there, but I'm pretty certain that Isabel Oakeshott did not suggest employing the boat people. I'll find out from her, but I know Isabel, this is not the sort of thing she would suggest at all. I certainly think it's a terrible idea. You start allowing these people to have jobs, they've got their feet underneath the table. It means they're here. You know, don't give them jobs. That's to pretty much allow them residency. So I don't agree with that. Clearly you don't, and I'm pretty certain that Isabel doesn't anyway. So I think you've slightly got the wrong end of the stick there. But fair play. I agree with the gist of what you're saying. This is from Ernie. Kev, does this government actually believe that these so-called asylum seekers are going to stay in their hotels? How are they going to pay their gangmasters the thousands of pounds plus interest they owe them? There's only one way that can pay them back, and it's not sitting on their butts all day, believe me. Well, a lot of them do stay in the hotels because it's a nice life. They get given a few quid. They got a nice warm roof over their heads. They get free food. They quite like it. A lot of them do stay in the hotels, but a lot of them, you're quite right, Ernie, they get here, they spend one night in the hotels, then they disappear. And also, when we talk about all these migrants who are breaking into the country, don't forget, not all of them are arrested or detained. Well, they're never arrested, they're detained. Not all of them are caught. They just do get into the country. So God knows what happens to them then, so it's all getting worse and worse and worse. Now, let's go back to the phones and talk to Herbie in Harrow. Hello, Herbie.
Yes, good evening, Kevin. Where's this 800 million going to come from? Keir Starmer's back pocket? How the hell can he commit us?
Your back pocket, Ernie. You're a taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer. It's coming from our back pockets.
For 99 years, Kevin, none of us will be alive by then when it all comes to fruition, all comes to the end. Where is the money coming from? Why don't people say, what right have you got to commit us to that sort of debt? It's a debt.
It's a very good point. And also, look at the way this government spends money. It's fond of telling us, they've left us with a terrible financial black hole, 22 billion. Well, they then commit to spending 22 billion, that magic figure, on something called a carbon capture scheme in Liverpool, whatever the hell that is. They're going to send £11.6 billion abroad to foreign countries for their green claptrap schemes, plus our normal foreign aid budget, which I think is about 12 billion or something like that. We're sending, tens of billions and billions of pounds abroad, and they tell us that we haven't got enough money.
Well, this is it, Kevin. It's madness. Look, we can't. They cannot waste and spend our money like this. Somebody's going to have to say enough's enough. Yeah. It's up to the public to say we're not taking it any longer. You're going to be accountable. If you waste our money, you pay it back out of your pocket. We're not paying for you for your mistakes. We've had enough of making and paying for your mistakes.
Yeah,
no more.
I'm with you, Herbie. Yeah, but whether or not that will be effective, I wish they could be persuaded to stop wasting all this money, particularly abroad, particularly on all this green claptrap that doesn't do any of us any good at all, apart from make our energy bills the most expensive in the Western world. Thank you very much. And by the way, the Chagos Islands, right, this deal, this disastrous, dismal deal that Starmer and Lammy want to do, the good news is they are going to seek Donald Trump's approval. Now, Trump is going to turn around and say, are you kidding me? He's going to say no. So it looks as if, thank God, this Chagos deal is going to go up in smoke. I hope it does. But everything you say, Herbie, is exactly right. This government, whilst complaining our Tories didn't leave us any money, is wasting money on an industrial scale, sending billions and billions and billions of pounds abroad. What the hell is going on? It is madness. Herbie, I think you agree that it's madness, and it was really good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Please give me a call again. Let's quickly go to Birmingham and talk to Mark. Hello, Mark. Are you there, Mark? Mark's back now, I think. Are you there?
I'm here, Kev. I'm here.
Hello, mate. Yeah, you're happy that Trump's coming in. So am I. What would you like to say?
Mate, I think it's fantastic. I wish we could be the 54th state of the United States because he's given everybody freedom. Starmer's taking it away as fast as he can.
I totally agree. We were just talking about this ludicrous Chagos Islands deal. Luckily, the government has decided at last that maybe they might have to be a bit friendly to Donald Trump. So they've decided to wait until he's president next week before they sign the deal. Donald Trump is just going to go no. He's going to say no.
I hope he does. Yeah. I hope he does. They're ours. They should stay ours. It's a good strategic area. We should never have given it away. I don't know what the bloke's doing. I mean, he's just off his head. He really is.
Let's just unpick this Chagos Island deal, right? Mauritius, first of all, you ever been to Morocco or anywhere like that? Have you been?
I have. I've been to Tunisia.
Okay, right. Okay. So the Chagos Islands is probably further away from Mauritius than Tunisia is from London. It's 1,400 miles away. Mauritius has never had sovereignty over the Chagos Islands, never particularly wanted them, and yet suddenly Britain started saying, here, have them. You know, this is colonial. You can have this territory. And they go, we don't really want it. Well, we'll give you £800 million pounds a year for 99 years. Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
This is why? Why? Yeah. But the good news is Donald Trump is going to say no. So it looks as if this insane deal, this insane cessation of strategically vital territory, the Chagos Islands, Diego Garcia, where this big airport is, this military airport that's used by America and us, it looks as if Donald Trump would just say no, because it's mad.
I hope he does. The Chagos Islanders don't want to be owned by Mauritius anyway. No. And we should listen to their viewpoint and not just Starmer's.
Yeah. Well, don't forget we kicked them off in the 1960s. Bizarrely, the Chagos Islands, what do they call them? Chagosians. Their big community here is in Crawley, in Sussex, near Gatwick Airport. I don't know why that is. I just think it's interesting. I think that they just flew into Gatwick and said, oh, that looks like a nice town, we'll stay here.
We'll stop there.
Yeah. but we kicked them off. And repatriating, I think, would be a nice idea, but whether or not that happens, I think is a long shot. But I do think Donald Trump is going to, as they say in America, nix this ridiculous deal, and I really hope he does. Mark, I think you do too. Great to talk to you, mate. Thank you very much. Give me another call. Mark in Birmingham there. Now, we're going to go to break, but when we come back, more of your calls, more of your messages, and don't forget, I say don't forget, I haven't mentioned it yet, for FYI, for your information, if you don't know what that stands for. Petri Hoskin will be in a little while to tell you what she's got lined up for your entertainment between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. on the show that both her and me found out not so long ago was called Nightlife. She didn't even know. Anyway, Nightlife is coming up at 10. Petri will tell you what's going to be in it in just a few minutes. But first, your calls and your messages. Stay exactly where you are.
gave the Act great teeth, because if there's one thing that the University Council is worried about, it's not so much free speech in many cases, but certainly liability for damages is something they very much do worry about. So it certainly was something that was a major component of the new Act. Like I said, we haven't heard anything more than you have, and we'll wait to see what the government has to say to us. The devil will be in the detail.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Right, welcome back. Let's talk, let's get your WhatsApp voice notes. We've got a couple here. The first one is about Sara Sharif. You remember those three judges, for some reason, granted anonymity, so we can't find out what their names are because they made terrible mistakes, obviously, that had fatal results, to be honest with you. This is David talking about Sara Sharif.
Good evening, Kevin. Just want to know, what does a daughter have to do for the father, and aided and abetted by the wife? What does she have to do to be murdered like that wee girl, Sarah? Absolutely terrifying. What barbaric culture does these people come from?
Well, I don't know about the culture, but those two people, the father and the stepmother, they're animals. Just disgusting what they did to that poor little girl. With you, David. Chagos Islands is the next topic, and the WhatsApp voice note lever is Claire. Take it away, Claire.
Evening, Kevin. So why are we handing over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius? Simple. We're dealing with the enemy within. Starmer is a closet Corbynite, the wolf in sheep's clothing, hates this country and is undermining it in every way he can. He's a terrorist sympathiser, as you've shown with Jerry Adams and his cronies. He knows that the Chagos Islands are a key defence to the West, and that tells us everything we need to know about his militant ideology.
Well, Claire, what can I say? I think that's an excellent WhatsApp voice note, and I respect your views, some of which, perhaps were very strong. But you have every right to conclude what you did. So thank you very much. The Chagos Islands deal is insane. Let's go back to the phones. And first of all, let's talk to David, who wants to talk about Rachel from Accounts. What would you like to say, David?
Hi, Kevin. It's just about Rachel Reeves growing the economy.
Have you noticed her growing the economy? I can't say I have.
No. And, Kevin, what I want to say is that the trouble is they're pursuing net zero at the same time. And net zero means the complete opposite of growing the economy. Net zero is about constricting our lives and freedoms, taking away our energy security, job losses and higher taxes.
Yeah, it's going to ruin the economy, and it's going to ruin all our personal economies because the prices, the energy costs are soaring. Our bills are soaring. It's because Ed Miliband spends so much on net zero, on greenery, and we have to pay levies on our bills, and the bills are going up and up and up. He said that the net zero project, that windmills and solar panels would reduce our bills. They go down. Well, they're going in the opposite direction. They're going up and up and up. So when Reform UK, I'm not here to bat for them, but when they say we will solve the migrant crisis and we will cancel net zero madness, these are attractive policies. The main parties don't seem to see that. We don't want to spend a fortune on your green claptrap, Ed. Simple as that. I'm with you, David. Really good call. Thank you very much. Call me again, David in London. Let's go across the pond, shall we? America. It's the country of the moment. The inauguration on Monday of Donald Trump, the presidential inauguration. We're going to go to Michigan, USA, talk to a regular caller, Cindy. Hello, Cindy.
Hey, Kevin, lots to say here, so I'm going to make it really fast. I want to say, first of all, and most importantly, thank you, because you make the news easy when you present. You make it easy to understand.
Yeah, I have to, Cindy, otherwise I wouldn't understand it. I bring everything down to my level. But thank you very much. Kind words, thank you.
And my level, too. You and Mike Graham are the best in the universe, the best that I've ever seen in my life.
Well, thank you.
Secondly, yes, in my life. I mean, I'm 52, by the way. Okay, so to Chagos Islands, I want to say I find Keir Starmer downright inflammatory. This deal could make it easier for the word and the information to get back to China. What is he thinking? I think he's trying to drive your country into the ground.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it is, Cindy. I'll tell you what I think it is. It's a kind of, these people are socialists. They're left-wing, and one of their big bête noirs, the thing that they hate is colonialism. So they see the fact that territorially Britain kind of owns or, is running the Chagos Islands, with the help of America, as some sort of old-school colonial imperial thing, and therefore they want to give the Chagos Islands back to its rightful owners. Mauritius is 1,400 miles away. It has never had sovereignty over these Chagos Islands. And when we first started saying, have them back, they're going, what do you mean have them back? Don't you want them? Not especially. We'll give you £800 million a year if you take them back. Oh, yeah, all right then. Yeah, OK, now we're talking. Well, Donald Trump, Cindy, I think your new president is going to come in on Monday. The British government has agreed to wait until next week for Donald Trump's approval on this deal, and I think that approval will not be forthcoming. He's going to nix this deal stone dead, don't you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. Donald Trump is going to just stop this, dead in its tracks before it even goes through. But I also think that Keir Starmer, dangerous. I personally believe that he's got a lot of views in common with the president of China, and that's why he sees it that way. Yeah. That's the only reason in my eyes. And that's pretty scary for us and for your country.
Yeah, well,
he needs to get out of there.
Many of us believe that Keir Starmer doesn't really like Britain, doesn't really like our traditions.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
And I see it. Yeah. And it's very alarming, and that's why I use the word inflammatory.
Yeah. Well, your new president, Cindy, says he might well invade Greenland and take it over. As many people in this country here in Britain have said, why don't you just invade Britain, take us over, just deliver us from these awful socialists. Keir Starmer and his lefties. Works for me. Cindy, give us a ring next week. Tell us what you think about the inauguration. Be good to talk. Always a pleasure, though. Thank you very much for the call. Cindy in Michigan, USA. Let's go. I've got a quick message here. I wanted to read this out. It's from Katie. She says, we need to stop talking about the Chagos Islands deal. Trump has made it known to Starmer that all hell will break out if this deal is done without his approval. This is why at PMQs today, he was still saying it's a great deal. Well, yeah, actually, it's not quite the case, but Trump, we decided to give Trump the right to approve this deal or not approve it, and he won't approve it. But the deal is terrible. We don't need to stop talking about it. We need to keep highlighting the awfulness of it. Quickly, last call to Jane in Marbella in Spain. Hello, Jane.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. What would you like to say?
Good. I absolutely endorse what you said about Israel and the hostages tonight, very early on in your programme.
Yeah, let them out. Otherwise, where's the peace? Yeah.
Well, I immediately called a very good friend in Israel to say, what the hell is going on? She said, I'm not watching. My husband is. She said, I can't watch it anymore. I then sent my nephew and his wife separate WhatsApp messages with fingers crossed. And neither of them have answered me.
Yeah, well, the thing is... Yeah, go on.
I personally think it will get resolved because of Trump.
Yeah, well, I think the Prime Minister of Qatar, who's brokered this deal, says it is the Trump effect. That Trump said, if we haven't got some sort of peace deal involving the release of the hostages when I come into power next week, all hell will break loose. So he has brought about this deal. There's a slight problem with it from my point of view, though, insofar as it does not involve the full release of every hostage. But I think that Trump has persuaded Netanyahu, if you're going to do a deal, you have to make concessions. I mean, it's a step forward, Jane, but I do think at this stage we're getting overexcited about it. Jane, really good call. Thank you for ringing. I've got to go because it's nearly the end of the show, but it's always good to hear from you. Thank you very much. Jane in Marbella in Spain. Petri Hoskin is in the studio. Hello, Petri.
Hello. How are you doing? All right.
I'm doing okay.
Good.
What's on your show?
What's on my show? Well, I mean, you can't go anywhere these days without hearing people talk about it, and that is these weight loss drugs. So I'm going to be looking into
My
this.
sister's on them. I saw her. She came to stay with me at the weekend.
Did she?
She said, I lost 2 stone.
Wow. Did you notice that she'd lost 2 stone? Brothers are rubbish, right?
But anyway, she's on it. She says got no side effects.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing.
And she ate quite well, to be honest.
This is an absolute, revolution now, and it is being lined up in terms of healthcare with chemotherapy, with penicillin.
Yeah.
This is going to be